Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maureen O'Connor from Quilters Heaven in Northbrook, Illinois, and I am the Opinionated Quilter. Today's episode, number 38, is using good equipment. But before we get to that, I'd like to wish you all the happiest of holiday seasons. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and happy any other holiday you may celebrate. Also, I'd like to thank all of you who have participated in our survey with ideas for upcoming episodes. Please keep those ideas coming, and please continue to comment on all of our videos. Now, let's get to today's episode. It's all my opinion, so there's no separate opinion section. Using good equipment. If you are not having fun with your equipment, you are not having fun sewing. Using good equipment not only will increase the quality of your end product, but it will also increase the enjoyment of the sewing process. When we first started doing these videos, the very first episode was what is needed to be successful at quilting. And I started with accurate cutting, accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, and pressing. I want to add to that seam matching, which is kind of a subset of pressing. And then our biggest piece of equipment that we use in sewing, our sewing machine. Let's start with accurate cutting. Before you cut your first strip of fabric, you need to press it and treat it. Now, you don't have to marinate it in starch overnight and then press it all before you start. You can use any number of products to help you with your pressing before you cut, to cut accurately. You can use regular starch. You can use Best Press, Mary Ellen's Best Press. Love this stuff. This is a new one to me that I just got, and I really like it. It's called Easy Press Fabric Treatment from Acorn, and it comes with a mister bottle, and I quite like this one. Now, after you press your fabric and you're ready to start cutting, you're going to cut according to the pattern instructions, or, as you know we do often, alter the pattern instructions to cut the pieces the way we think the unit should be constructed. So after you're pressed and ready to go, you need to first square up your edge. And we've done this before. You take your ruler, put a horizontal line on the fold. When the fabric is in front of you, the fold should be towards you and the selvage is up top. You go ahead, line it up, the horizontal line on the fold, open your rotary cutter. Now you're all squared up. Then you flip it over, and now you use whatever measurement you need. If I put it here, that's a 2.5 inch cut. Whatever you're cutting, same thing, just cut across. Now, as far as rulers go, you want a ruler that's not going to move. These Quilter Select rulers do not move. If you have a ruler that does move, there's all kinds of products that can help you. I love this Rough It Up tape. This stuff is great. Anytime I have a ruler moving, I pull it out of the drawer and go ahead and put it on that ruler. Many people like the Invisigrip. Deb Tucker uses Invisigrip all the time. There's also other things you can use. You can use grip strips. There's grip dots from Gypsy Quilter, and then there's True Grips from the Grace Company. All these things will keep your rulers from moving. In addition to not wanting your rulers to move, you want to use the correct size ruler or the correct ruler. For instance, if you're going to be cutting a whole bunch of strips the same size, the Stripology ruler is great. Makes quick, fast, accurate work of cutting strips all the way across the width of this ruler quick. And like I said, accurate. if you're going to be cutting, say, this into squares, you don't want to be using a 6.5 by 24 ruler to cut squares across here. You want a smaller square ruler. It makes it much easier. You're not going to have this sticking into your belly as you're trying to cut. You use the correct size ruler as well. And then, of course, there's all the specialty rulers to cut whatever specialty shapes you need. But those you acquire as you're doing that particular project. So to sum it up, you want rulers that don't move. You want properly pressed and treated fabric. I think I failed to mention a sharp rotary blade. You definitely want a sharp rotary blade. And you want the correct ruler. Now let's move to a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to show you an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance on this beautiful new Bernina Kaffe Edition B770. My other machine is gone, replaced by this lovely, lovely machine. So on the Bernina machines, you've got plenty of places to look for your 1/4 inch seam allowance. Notice I don't say scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. I say accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. To test your seam allowance, you should take 3 strips of fabric 1.5 inches wide by at least 6 inches long, sew them together, press, and measure. Your strip width should be exactly 3.5 inches wide. If it's smaller than 3.5 inches wide, your seam allowance is too big. If it's larger than 3.5 inches wide, your seam allowance is too small. So you want to play with your machine and practice pieces until you know where you should be looking to get the accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance. On the Bernina machines, you have several spots to look. There's a 1/4 inch mark on the throat plate. There's a 1/4 inch mark on the tray here, and then a long 1/4 inch mark here. It also has different feet you can use. Both of these are 1/4 inch feet. This is the 97D foot, and this is the 57 foot, which has a guide on it. Now the guide is nice to sew strips together, but if you're going to use pins, you can't sew over pins with the guide. Now other brand machines also have feet with and without guides. You just have to find out what you like the best and get the best foot for how you sew. So I am going to put on the 97D foot, and then we have the dual feed on that, so I engaged the dual feed. And I'm going to line up my fabric. I like to look at this mark here. I'm going to put my foot down. And my head's going to get in here for a second. I just want to position the fabric correctly. I'll get right out of the way after I get it where I want it. Okay, that's good. So I can start sewing now. Oh, it's telling me I didn't tell it I have the right foot on it, and I didn't. It says I have a 1D foot on, but I don't. I have the 97D. The machine won't work if you don't tell it you have the correct foot on it, which is nice, because you don't want to break needles. All right, so now it should go, and it does. And I'll use my seam ripper to hold down seams if I need to. I want these to stay real even. And then I'm just going to use the scissors function to cut the thread. And now I'm ready to show you pressing. Now for accurate pressing. The first thing you want to do is to set the seam. And then you have on top the way you want to press, which direction you want the seam to go. So if I want it to go to this green border, I have this on top. If I want it to go to the main piece, I have this on top. Normally on borders, I go to the border. So now we're going to flip this up and press. And then you're good to go. I would put the other one on. I would trim these off and then put two sides on. Now, I said almost always I press towards the border. And this would be an exception to that. This is a little 1-inch cut piece to finish to a half. And if you press the brown towards the red, I shouldn't say that, excuse me, if you press the brown, the white towards the brown, and then try to sew on the red, your 1/4-inch foot is going to be bumping up against the side. So if this were an inch piece, I would press this way so that when I sew the next piece on, this edge is not getting into my way. Just a little tiny little tip. If you're going to do tiny little pieces, press your border to your body of your piece. Normally easier to press towards the border. But you want to do a nice good press to keep everything super flat. That's it for pressing. So now I want to show you real quickly matching seams. We've done it before, so I'm not going to dwell on it. We have now, after pressing, I've pressed to the pink and to the pink. So I put them together so that they meet here. You can feel it with your thumb and your forefinger. When the seam allowance is going up, I don't bother pinning because the feed dogs are going to push this right into where they meet. And I'm just going to put it in and sew. And normally you're going to have a ton of them. You just keep chain sewing all the way through. If I need to pin, I like to use the magic pins. They're super thin, super sharp. You can sew over them. I don't take out my pins if I want my seams to match perfectly. Now to the sewing machine, your biggest piece of equipment, which will help make your sewing much more fun. First, the features. On this machine, I've got a single hole plate here so that you don't ever have fabric getting pushed down into the oval hole when you're doing straight stitch piecing. If you need to do a zigzag, you change out the plate. But the good news is that as long as you have told the machine that you have the 0mm plate on it, it won't let you do a zigzag. There's so many good features of this machine to make your life easy. It has a needle down stop position. It has the knee lift, which once your foot is down and you need to lift it to pivot, you just lift up your foot, pivot, turn, and go. I once had a customer, not too long ago actually, who was machine quilting a small piece. It was the first time she'd ever done it. Her machine didn't have a needle down position and didn't have a knee lift. So every time she needed to pivot, she stopped the sewing, lifted her foot off the foot pedal, used her hand on the hand wheel to lower the needle, used her hand to lift up the foot, pivoted her work, put the foot back down again, and continued sewing. This is a tiny, tiny piece. And can you imagine how many times you have to pivot each time you turn? This, for me, I just sew. Here's a little scrap of fabric to show you on. So I just sew till I get to a pivot point. Needle stops down. I use my knee to lift the foot. I turn my work to the next pivot point. Lift, turn my work, and on and on and on. Great two features of this machine, needle down and knee lift. Another thing I love is the scissors function. You can set the tie-offs So it will also tie off for you. You can take the tie-offs off if you don't want them on. Other things that are great about this machine is all the different feet that you can have. Now, back to this example, I did just bring the backing up to the top instead of binding, so I needed to sew this down. Look at how beautifully straight that looks. That's because I use this foot and I hook this ledge on the edge of the binding, faux binding, and then I move my needle position over a couple of stitches. It won't let me do it now because I have the 97D foot on, but that's how I sewed this. Another foot that makes your sewing so much easier is this 20D foot, where I can see so clearly. If I'm going to sew these in the ditch, I like this foot because nothing impedes my vision. You can see that the needle is here. It's marked on the foot, and I can see really well. So all these things add up to making your life in sewing easy. It makes sewing fun. You don't want to have trouble with your machine or have a machine that won't do the things that you want it to do. And I'm having an awful lot of fun with this beauty here. So that's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed this video, please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, happy sewing.